Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. We cover everything Major League, from spring training to the World Series. We've got your favorite club covered, from New York to Boston to LA. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Ridenauer, and we've got another great episode in store for everyone at home today. Hope everyone has been doing well and started the new year off strong and have figured out what their New Year's resolution will be. I know I have a few, New Year's resolutions this year that I want to try, but like anyone else with a resolution, it'll definitely take time to get into a rhythm, but it'll eventually get figured out. That's what I've always said. It's just a matter of time. You kind of have to slowly, gradually build into it, and then before you know it, come February, come March, if you really want to stick with that, whatever you want to do, whatever resolution it is, you're going to turn it into a habit. You're going to turn it into kind of a habitual, every single day thing. But anyways, we've got a sensational show today. I want to get into some rankings, some news, and just really anything else we can get into. So I'll first kick things off with some news in the baseball world and any and all of the reports and updates from the free agency frenzy this offseason. I'll then get into some rankings, this time of first basemen in the league, as I'll give my best first baseman rankings in the MLB right now and discuss who I have in the top of my list. And as I move out of that ranking segment in segment 2 and get into segment 3, I'll get into discussing what the most likely landing spots and potential next destinations could be for DJ LeMahieu, as we are still unsure as to where he will land next. But I'll give my likely teams he could be seen wearing a jersey next for, and in all honesty, he's not the only big-time free agent that we're still kind of waiting on. And be sure to stick around for the final few minutes of the show, as I'll get into a new segment I like to call Buy It or Deny It, where I discuss why I either buy it or deny it. I did this last episode. I'm going to do it again. It could be a claim, it could be a belief or speculation in the baseball world, whatever it might be, and I'll discuss why I may buy or deny it. I'll get into what that claim will be here in just a little bit, but a great segment coming up nonetheless, so we've got a ton of stuff to get into. I want to first get into this segment here, talk about some news, talk about some recent reports and everything, because there's been some really incredible news going around. I mean, groundbreaking news, really, in the baseball world, and that is the first black woman coach in professional baseball has been hired, as Bianca Smith has been recently hired by the Boston Red Sox to be a minor league coach for the team. How can this not be an incredible moment, right? This is another instance and another example where barriers are being brought down and doors are being opened that were not necessarily open before. And I think that's such an important thing. We're already starting to see it in not necessarily baseball, but in a lot of different other sports. And we've seen in baseball specifically another situation where another woman has been hired into a position in baseball that, again, before that, it was really not a thing. It was not something that was a very normal thing. And now it's becoming more and more normalized, and it should be. Everybody should be given that fair shot and that fair chance to be what they want to be. And I think it's great that Coach Bianca Smith is being hired. And I got to say, not to mention not just her, but also Kim Ng, the new GM for the Miami Marlins. That's another instance where we've got a woman in baseball now in a position where, again, before this, that was not necessarily a thing. That wasn't something that would happen. And I think that it's great that these doors that are opening up for people that weren't open before are now starting to really allow a lot of different people in, and just really anyone. And I think that baseball is one sport, but all the sports that are starting to do it, and all the sports that are really starting to change, and trust me, there's a much needed change in professional sports, because we have to allow everybody. We have to give everybody an equal opportunity to be what they want to be ultimately in life, and I think that's such an important thing. It doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, or any of that. It's just, can you do the job? Are you capable of doing it? And you shouldn't have to look into anything else. It should not be anything else other than, can you do this job? Yes or no. We don't care who you are. If you can do it, you're hired. And I think that's the mentality that we have to all have in sports. Is it doesn't matter what you look like or who you are or where you come from or what your belief is, whatever. As long as you are a capable, responsible individual that's able to carry out any and execute any sort of job, you should be hired. And I think this is another step forward in the right direction, and really excited to see where Bianca Smith goes in baseball after this. She was currently an assistant coach and a hitting coordinator at Carroll University in Wisconsin. And so then before then, she was at Case Western Reserve University as a director of baseball operations. She's going to be working in the player development facility in Florida for the Boston Red Sox, working mostly with position players. So somebody that brings a lot of experience. Again, very similar to Kim Ng, who has been in baseball for years. It's just another person where we've started to see that, hey, you know what? They've got experience. They've been around the game. We're going to give them an opportunity, and she's been given an opportunity. I think it's an incredible move by baseball, and there's other things that have been going on in baseball, obviously. I mean, we have, and I've talked about it before, the possibility of the Nashville Stars moving into Nashville and how they're really trying to not only promote baseball and music and really that kind of country music atmosphere at the baseball game, but also becoming a predominantly black-owned baseball team. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe they want to name themselves the Nashville Stars, the team, because it was a Negro League team. And so I think that's another kind of instance where things are starting to change for the better. And we're starting to see kind of a more opening of the doors and really just a diversifying of baseball and sports in general. I mean, we've seen it in so many other sports too so far. And so I'm really excited to see not only where just general sports go with this new hiring and this new kind of mindset going forward, but also just baseball specifically and what is kind of on the horizon. You know, could we eventually see the first woman manager? You know, I think that would be really, really cool in being able to see that in sports. But there's a lot of exciting things going on in the baseball world, a lot of exciting changes that are much needed. And in all honesty, change is it's a good thing. It's a very, very good thing, and I think we're starting to see it now, and I'm really excited to just see where it's going to go from here. But there's been other news in baseball involving some rumors now in the free agency market, because that's another big offseason topic that we've all been talking about, and that is Yasiel Puig, former All-Star outfielder. He has started actually to garner some interest from some teams, and a couple of them fall in the same division, actually. I mean, a couple teams that have been interested in him so far, the Yankees, Red Sox, Orioles, all in the AL East, the Astros and the Marlins. Very interesting teams to go after him. I mean, being 3 or 4 of the 5 are in the AL, that might be telling me something that, hey, maybe this guy might just stay as a DH, because in all honesty, Yasiel Puig has not been that great of a fielder in his career. I mean, there's been many times where he's got a great arm, but he can't read a fly ball to save his life. He's not, and I think that his hitting has started to kind of digress a little bit and take a step back. He's been injury prone. He's been battling a lot of injuries. He's actually battling an injury right now. He's playing in a winter league, if I'm not mistaken, and he's battling a leg injury currently. So he's been banged up the last couple years. And I think if he's healthy, I think that the only way that's going to get there is if he's taken out of a fielding position. He needs to just be a DH, because if he could just stick with DHing and just strictly focused on hitting, I think we could see the same effect that Marcell Ozuna had this year in terms of, hey, you took him out of the lineup, you just told him, hey, just hit. That's all you have to focus on. And look at what he did. He excelled incredibly. And that might be kind of the same thing that could happen to Yasiel Puig. And I think a lot of other guys are in that same boat where if you take them out of the field, and it sounds kind of crazy, but if you just made them strictly hit, they'll have that much better of a career. And I think that with Yasiel Puig, he's got a lot of potential. I mean, he hit 24 homers in 2019 between being with the Reds and the Indians. He didn't play in 2020. A deal didn't work out with the Braves, and there was COVID-19 issues, this, that, and the other. Things just didn't work out, not to mention, I mean, it's a 60-game season, right? There was a lot of guys that decided to opt out, and so I don't blame him for wanting to do that or really just saying, you know what, I'm going to just come back 2021 healthy and ready to go. But in all honesty, out of these teams that are interested in him, the Marlins make, I think, a lot of sense. I mean, they make, in my opinion, some of the most sense because they had the 8th worst OPS in baseball last season. And Puig has an 800-plus career OPS, so somebody that is going to bring a lot of pop, a lot of power with their bat in the lineup. And I think that's what's important. I think that for the Marlins moving forward, they didn't have any hitting. That's what I think really set them back in the playoffs this year. I think they got lucky going up against another team like the Cubs that also was not a very good hitting team, and they just were able to capitalize on a couple, runs here and there. I mean, if you look at those 2 games back in the playoffs, it was literally a 2-run home run that I think was the difference in one of the games, if I'm not mistaken. So one swing was the difference. It wasn't like a all-out offensive just demolishing of the Chicago Cubs. It was a pitching battle. It was a defensive grind by both teams. And I think that everybody in the Marlins organization is starting to realize, hey, we don't have a whole lot of power hitting, and we need some. Not to mention, if you do stick him in the outfield, you'd have him and Starling Marte in the outfield. I think that would be a great duo for them. It would add a little bit more hitting. It would add a little bit more help for Starling Marte. But I don't know if he'll land there because, again, the NL might not have the DH this year. So I think that's why the AL seems so much more likely for him to land. And the Orioles and Astros, I think, clearly want to add power hitting. I think they both need it. They both need to fill in kind of a couple holes in their lineup. I mean, they were both in the bottom half in team home runs this past year. The Astros losing a lot of bats this offseason. I mean, you've got Michael Brantley, who's going to probably walk. You've got George Springer. So there's some guys that are starting to leave, and that's going to open up the payroll a little bit. That's going to open up the cap room some. So you can definitely go out and get a guy like Yasiel Puig. Again, I don't know if you would want to put him in the outfield, so I don't know how you would replace Springer and Brantley in that situation. But, hey, if you go out after Puig and you put him as a DH or something, and then maybe go and sign Jackie Bradley Jr., you are getting two solid players for a fraction of what you'd have to pay if you went after George Springer and re-signed him, or DJ LeMahieu, or one of these other guys. I think that would be a very good, wise move by the Astros, especially with how poor of a year they're coming off of. If you think about it, this team probably took the biggest step back out of all teams in baseball, by far. No question about it. They literally went from the first team, the best hitting team average-wise and OPS-wise in 2019, to then being the 19th best team, I believe, in average and 20th in OPS, or one of those are flip-flops, one of the two. But they had a ginormous drop-off from a year, and so I think that is kind of a big reason why the Astros really want to try and get back into that top 10 power hitting category and power hitting ranking in the MLB, because they really need that. They need that for them to, I think, excel, because they've got a lot of power still in this lineup. And I think if they can add Puig, it's going to add so much more of a dimension to them. But then the Orioles, they're probably looking for just a veteran bat. They've got a lot of young talent. They've got a lot of young people on that team that I think are going to be very, very good, Ryan Mountcastle being one of them. And I think that they definitely need a home run hitter in their lineup, too. I mean, the highest home run total for the Orioles this past year was 12 from Renato Nunez, and he's a free agent. So if you think about it, you don't have your leading home run hitter anymore, and I think Puig would slide right on in. He would fit the mold very, very well. But then the Red Sox and the Yankees, I think they're a given for really anybody. I think because everybody knows that they could go after just about anybody that they wanted. They're the Yankees and the Red Sox. They're two of the most storied baseball franchises. They're two of the most storied sports franchises ever, and they have some of the highest payroll ever. So I think that, again, that's kind of a given for really anybody who's a free agent. Anyone that is any sort of interest to them, they can go after. But wherever he lands, I could see him turning into a strict DH. I really could see that, because unlike Marcell Ozuna, Yasiel Puig, I think, it really struggles in the field. Marcell Ozuna has won a Gold Glove. Let's not forget about that. He is a capable fielder. He's had some shoulder issues in the past, and so I think that has affected some things. But Yasiel Puig, when he was healthy, he still wasn't that great of a fielder. Yeah, he had a huge arm. He has an absolute huge arm. But in terms of technique and I think actual defensive skills, not great. And so I think that's why he would benefit greatly, not to mention being also so injury-prone. I think he would really benefit greatly from just being a strict DH. So very curious to see if he'll land anywhere or where he'll land right now he's playing in a winter league, I believe. So he's still getting in reps. He's still getting in baseball, experience right now, and getting some time down where I can't remember where he is. He might be in Cuba or he might be in Puerto Rico. So he's playing somewhere where they have winter leagues, and I'm not quite sure exactly where, but I think that it's important that he is staying in that baseball mode. And it's important, I think, that a lot of guys try and stay in that baseball mode. I don't know if many other guys are able to do that and if they're allowed to, but I think that it's smart for Puig, and he is battling a leg injury, like I mentioned, but hopefully he can come out of that and be ready for 2021. But there's actually been a signing in the MLB world recently, as the San Francisco Giants have again made another move. I know this is a team I've said could be a big-time signer next year for a lot of teams, with a lot of their players being free agents, that is the Giants, after this offseason or after the season. But this year, they just signed Curt Casali, former catcher for the Reds, to a one-year, $1.5 million deal. I think it's a solid sign. I mean, I don't think anything really is going to be taken away or gained drastically. I think it just adds a little bit more of a cushion behind Buster Posey, a reliable veteran catcher. Assuming that Buster Posey does come back this year, things will probably be fine, but if not, they're probably bracing for the fact that Posey could potentially say, no, I don't want to play again, and opt out again. And not going to lie, it's going to give some veteran leadership to their up-and-coming catcher star in Joey Bart. And now Bart, he was okay this year. He wasn't great. He had a really tough rookie year for the most part. He batted .233. He only had 7 RBIs. He had a .609 OPS. But again, he's only 23 years old, so he's got a lot of time to develop. Really, really has a lot of time to develop. But Curt Casali, he's not a great batter. He's not a great hitter at all. He did bat .293 in 2018, which has been his career high out of the seasons that he's played at least 50 games in. So not too far removed from a pretty solid year, but again, he's not somebody that you would think is a very consistent hitter in the lineup. And I think they just wanted, just a veteran, really. I think they just wanted a veteran catcher behind the plate just in case that Posey decided to opt out again, which he might. We have no idea. David Price is another guy that opted out, and with all the uncertainty of COVID and when the vaccine will be administered to everybody and anybody, there is still a worry, and I think that a lot of these baseball players have that in the back of their mind. If I'm not mistaken, I believe I saw something the other day. The minor leagues, I think, are starting to postpone their return date for spring training. So we're starting to kind of see a little bit more of the issues bubbling up again like we saw a year ago, and we might run into that same problem. Maybe we get baseball delayed again. Maybe we have a shortened season. Who knows? But I think I'm really excited to see where this Giants team goes because, like I said, they've got a lot of guys that are going to be free agents after this year. Brandon Belt, Brandon Crawford, I believe. I'm trying to think. Jeff Samardzija. That's 3 guys. Jeff Samardzija's $90 million a contract. I don't know what he's making yearly, but it's going to be a lot of money off their payroll. And so I think that they are going to be a big-time suitor for at least a shortstop with Crawford walking next year. So I think that, and there's going to be a huge shortstop class of free agents. I definitely think that it's going to be a big landing spot next year in San Francisco. They could become kind of what the New York Mets are this year, or someone like the San Diego Padres where everybody is going there. That's what we could see San Francisco doing. But again, really excited to see what goes on in San Fran. And speaking of the New York Mets, actually, once again, they're in the news for being a potential suitor for another big-name free agent, and this time it could be some bullpen help, as the Mets are interested in Brad Hand, former All-Star closer and former Indians closer, and this would be ginormous for the Mets to get. He was an All-Star in 2017, 18, and 19. He led the MLB in saves this past season, so very dominant for any team's back end of the bullpen. If you need a guy to go in, shut things down in the bottom of the ninth, even the bottom of the eighth and bottom of the ninth, Brad Hand can do that. And being able to have a catcher that is not only durable, that could go 2 innings if he had to, but also somebody that is going to be quick, fast, and efficient in that bottom 9 inning or top 9 inning, whatever you might need, that's even better. And he's, literally one of the best closers in the game. He's very, very good at limiting the amount of blown saves he gives up. I will say the Mets, they already have Edwin Diaz as a closer, but here's the thing with Edwin Diaz, and this is why I think they bring in, or they would want to bring in somebody like Brad Hand. Diaz has blown 11 of his 43 save opportunities over the last 2 years. He did have a solid ERA this past year with a 1.75 clip. He had 50 Ks in 25 2/3 innings. So he had really good numbers. But in terms of shutting down the game and shutting down the opponent and trying to get the win and close things out, he's not great at that. He's not great at being a closer. It's exactly what his job is. He's a very good pitcher. He might be a really good relief guy. So that's why maybe, hey, if Brad Hand comes in, they move Diaz to more of a relief role, and I think that could, again, that's going to really broaden that bullpen up a little bit. Diaz can come in for 6th inning, the 7th inning, maybe even the 8th inning, be kind of an in-between guy, and then all of a sudden you've got Brad Hand. If you're any team opposing that and having to deal with not only Diaz but then Hand, that's going to be a hefty 1-2 punch coming out of that bullpen. And it could really mean that the Mets, they might go after, some more players potentially. They could go after some more starters possibly, but if they don't, they can go and get a very quality player in Brad Hand. Probably won't have to pay him a ton, which is very ideal, especially if they've already paid James McCann. They've already talked about wanting to pay this guy and that guy and here and here and here. And I think that would be very important if they could get him for a fraction of what he might be worth, because he'd be playing in a major market like New York. He'd be playing with a contending team, at least what a lot of people might think going into this year. I personally am not totally sold on that quite yet, but I think that if they do get Brad Hand and they get another piece, then yes, they will be a contender for sure. They're going to have a lot to do in terms of damage in the NL East with the Braves, because the Braves are coming back full force. The Nationals going and getting Josh Bell, the Padres in the NL. They're going to have a lot of teams to compete with, but if they can get this closer, Brad Hand, and if they can really try and keep Diaz there, they've got 2 really solid bullpen pieces, who knows, maybe they go out and get Liam Hendriks. I've seen his name floating around with a couple teams. I know the Dodgers just re-signed Blake Trinan to a 2-year, $17.5 million deal, and I know that they were in the mix for trying to get Liam Hendriks, so maybe that's going to start to steer away from them because they've re-signed Blake Trinan. Trinan was kind of the setup guy for Jansen, and Hendricks would have probably been the same guy if he were to be in a Dodgers uniform for Jansen. So I think that maybe Liam Hendriks starts to make his way back over into the East Coast a little bit. Who knows? A lot of things to still figure out. We've got a whole 2 months or so until baseball starts, and when the off-season's over, if it starts on time, if spring training is started up on the exact time when it should. So who knows what's going to happen, but all I know is that once all of these free agents sign, it's going to be an absolute just fiasco in baseball. But that'll do it for us in this first segment, folks. But don't go anywhere, because when I get back from the commercial break, I'll dive into my rankings of the top first basemen in the MLB right now and share who I think are the best right corner infielders in baseball. Folks, stay right there. We'll be right back here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA, to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Welcome back to the GSMC Baseball Podcast. Jack Ridenour with you all, and in our first segment, I got right into some big-time news in the baseball world, touch on some free agency signings, and anything really in between. Be sure to stick around for the final few minutes of the show today, as I'll get into my buy it or deny it segment and share whether or not I buy or deny the claim or belief that I will pose coming up here in a little bit, so stick around for that. I want to now get into my rankings of the top first basemen in the MLB right now and who are some of the best hitters and fielders at the position in the game right now. And again, right now, there's going to be some names on this list that should be, I think, just in general terms, maybe if we said, hey, the best first baseman over the last 20 years, or really of all time, yeah, we've got 3 of the best all time, I would say, or at least 2 of the best all time still playing: Miguel Cabrera, Albert Pujols, Joey Votto. Obviously, Pujols and Cabrera are way better than Votto, but Votto still has been very, very good. But I left those guys off the list because these are the guys that are really good right now. Pujols is definitely on the back end of his career. Cabrera, the same thing. Joey Votto might have a good year or 2 left in him, but let's all face it, they're all over the age of 35. Pujols is 40 now, so they're a little bit past their point of their prime. But I want to get into some guys that are in their prime right now, or at least at some point of their top part of their career, I would say. So getting into number 10, Yuli Gurriel is my first selection at 10. The Astros first baseman. I think he's been a big piece for this Astros team early on in his career. He kind of had a later start into his career, didn't start playing, until he was in his almost 30s or just about, or later 20s. So definitely a little bit of a later start to his baseball career. But he's been a very consistent hitter for the most part. I mean, he's batted .290 or higher in each of the last 3 years before 2020. He did bat .232 in 2020. He only had 6 homers and 22 RBIs. But the thing about Gurriel is that he's got a lot of power capability. He's got a high potential for a lot of power. He belted 31 homers and 104 RBIs in 2019. He had a .298 average and an .884 OPS, not to mention a .126 OPS plus and only 65 Ks in 144 games. I'm going to take a second on that 65 Ks in 144 games. That is a staggering rate to minimize the amount of strikeouts that you're getting as a first baseman. Usually when you've got a first baseman that's a big power hitter, 9 times out of 10, they've got a high swing and miss rate. That's just how it is. They're swinging for the fences, and that's how it's going to be. But at the same time, if you've got a guy that can limit that and can reel that back a little bit and is a patient hitter at the plate and he's a power hitter, patience and power tend to not go hand in hand all the time. But if you find somebody that's got patience and power, they're, I would say, far and few between, if you will. And I think that's Gurriel right there. He has not been to an all-star game. He hasn't been, a Silver Slugger or Gold Glove winner. But in all honesty, there's a couple guys on this list that haven't been to many all-star games, but they're still really, really good. And I think that the low strikeout numbers is what really caught my eye. His ability to be a power hitter at some times. And not to mention, he had a 3.9 WAR in 2019, which was the 8th highest out of first basemen. So Not too shabby of a stat to have for Yuli Gurriel. So he's coming in at number 10. But coming in at number 9, I'm going to go with Carlos Santana. And this might be a little bit of a bold pick. I mean, he's had a sensational couple years. At least in 2019 he did. And I think, that was his all-star year. That was really kind of his best year so far. 2020 was not a great year for him. I mean, he really struggled. But again, there's a lot of guys that struggled in 2020, right? I mean, that was kind of the overall arching theme of it. Christian Yelich, Cody Bellinger, all of these superstars that are really, really good did not have very good years. Again, only 60 games. You can't really do a whole lot in that amount of time if you start out pretty slow after the first 10 games. Carlos Santana, though, he's had 4 straight years of at least 20 or more homers, and the last 4 years before 2020 is when that happened. So really from 2016, 2017, or 2015 just about to 2019, that's when he was at his best. That's when he's been at his best, and in all honesty, he might have been pretty good this year if he'd played more than 60 games. He belted a career high in RBIs with 93 in 2019, and then he's hit 34 homers twice, which is a career high for him. He's done it in 2019, and he did it in 2016. So, again, another guy that's really, really good at power hitting, and he's got a lot of potential in that bat. He also is a high walks guy. He gets walked quite a bit, but I will say he also strikes out quite a bit, too. So it kind of evens itself out. But he did lead the MLB in walks this past year, and he's led the MLB in walks in previous years, especially in 2014. Having a guy that can get over 100 walks, think about all the opportunities you could have as a team to score that guy who's walked over 100 times. That's 100 opportunities to potentially score 100-plus runs. That's not too shabby of a rate of scoring, offensively, if you ask me. And so I think that having a guy on your team that, okay, yes, he does have a higher strikeout rate, but if he has a high walk rate, it can balance itself out because what the tilting point will be is his ability to hit. And that's what's really, I think, the separating factor for him is, the walks and the strikeouts kind of even out, but then the hitting is what takes him up to a whole nother level. I will say this was the first year being below 100 for OPS plus for him. So again, not a very good year for him. He only had a 91 OPS plus, but it's usually floated around 105 to 136 the last 4 years. So he does again have the capabilities of being a really good power hitter, and him being signed to the Royals, I love that. Again, I've said that many, many times. I think that he'll be a really nice piece for them, a really great fit. And in all honesty, we could see, I think, the Royals making a little bit of noise this year, but if they can keep people around for 2-3 years, they can make a lot of noise in a couple years. So I'm going with Carlos Santana at number 9. Coming at number 8, first baseman for the New York Yankees, Luke Voit. Luke Voit really, he tore it up this season. He led the MLB in homers with 22. He had a pretty solid batting average as well. The 277 clip, that's not too shabby for somebody who belted 22 homers. And again, that's that's a home run in almost, or over a third of the games he played. He played in 56 games. So over a third of the games he played in, he's hitting a home run. That's a pretty staggering rate. Again, imagine if this was a full 162-game season, we might have seen Voit go off for 50 home runs, and that's not an exaggeration. He's been pretty solid overall in his career, I'd say, average-wise, which, again, for a power hitter, that's not really a normal thing, because in 2019, he batted 263, and then in 2018, he batted 322. Now, in 2018, he only played about 50 to 60 games, but in 2019, going from 263 to then in 2020 going to 277, Voit was a rare case in some of the guys that were able to improve their numbers and saw a big jump and a big drastic change in their play. And Voit really, I think, this was kind of a coming out year for him, I think. Last season he had an 842 OPS. This year, 948. So just a shy under a 1,000 OPS. Not that shabby of a year for Luke Voit. And again, he's pretty young. So I think the Yankees, they've got to be happy that they've got a piece that they could build for in the future, and they could potentially really benefit from having him for the long run. And not to mention, he's in a place where they don't mind paying, and he's already on their team, so it'll be easier for whenever his contract is up for them to say, hey, we want you to stick around. We're keeping Stanton, we're keeping Judge, we're keeping all these guys. We want you to stick around. And even if Stanton and Judge start to age out and they start to move on in their careers or retire or whatever it might happen, think about it. They've got Voit, they've got Gleyber Torres, they've got a lot of guys in this team, Gio Urshela, they've got a lot of young guys that are coming up right now that could be the new kind of Stanton and Judge and LeMahieu. You might have that in the making right now with Voit, Urshela, and Gleyber Torres. So I think that that's going to be a very interesting dynamic that could potentially come to fruition in the near future. But regardless, being able to have him in your back pocket already, you won't have to do a whole lot to try and reel him back in when his contract goes up. So you could have this, this power bat in your lineup for years to come. And he had 52 RBIs this year, too. So not only a great home run hitter, he can drive in runs like none other. He had a 1.7 WAR this year, so just nearly a 2. And they usually say if you float around a 2, you're just under being an all-star. So he's right there. I think he's got all-star potential, and I think that he's just on the cusp of it. And we're going to see it in at least, I would say, 2 years, maybe even less. Who knows? So he's coming in at number 8. But number 7, I'm going to go Matt Olson from the Athletics. And again, I think he's a very undervalued, underappreciated first baseman. I mean, the guy can flat out play. 2020 was not a good year for him. It was not a good year for Matt Olson. If I'm not mistaken, he had one of the lowest or the lowest batting average in the MLB out of all qualifying hitters. So not a great stat to hang your hat on at all. But in 2019, he batted .267. He had a .545 slugging percentage and an .896 OPS with 36 homers and 91 RBIs. Now, in 2018, he had 29 homers and 84 RBIs. And in 2017, he had 24 homers and 45 RBIs. So you can kind of see the trend that's going with Matt Olson right now. It's an improvement. Each and every single year, he's gone up a little bit. 2017 to 2018, he goes up 5 home runs, and he goes up, over 40 RBIs, or just about 40 RBIs. And then from 2019 to 2018, or 2018 to 2019, he goes up another 5 or 6 home runs, 7 home runs, and he goes up another couple RBIs. So he's slowly, steadily, building himself up into the player that I think he'll become. This year, he actually had a pretty solid year. I mean, he had 42 RBIs in 60 games. Not too shabby. And think about it. He had 45 RBIs in 59 games in 2017. So, I mean, he might have had the year that he had in 2017 on, just completely expanded on. I think he really could have built on that year, and really the year before that. I mean, his average was not great. He did have 14 homers this year, so the power is there. It's the average that worries me, because even if you're not a great average hitter, no matter what, you need to stay above 200, and he wasn't even above 200 this year. So you need to stay above that Mendoza line, because if not, it doesn't matter what I think, it doesn't matter what the OPS is, I think, at that point. If you don't have a relatively respectable average and then have a really good OPS, I feel like you can't really be respected like a lot of other power hitters can be respected. Nowadays, you look at numbers and you say, okay, if a guy's batting .250, but he's got over an .850, 900 OPS, and he's got 30 home runs, and he's got 100 RBIs, that's a really good year. That's a great year for a power guy. And again, baseball started to kind of differentiate itself from what's power, what's contact, this, that, and the other. And so I think now we're starting to see that trend, and we're starting to see a normalization of, if you can bat .250 but you have a 975 OPS, that's an all-star year. And so I think that's just a showing of the changing of the game for sure. And Matt Olson, he could be one of those guys that benefits from it. If he can get his average to 250, 260 and keep the OPS up to upwards of 850, 900, this is going to be a consistent all-star for many, many years. He's also a really good defensive first baseman, too. He actually led the MLB in, or at least led the AL in the category in putouts by first baseman in 2018 and 2019. Not to mention he played 60 games this year, so a durable guy, good fielder, has the potential with a lot of power. I mean, the guy's legit. There's no question about that. So I'm really, really sold on Matt Olson. I'm a really, really big fan of his. And then getting into the next one, number 6, coming in, Pete Alonso. And I think Pete Alonso, in my opinion, is going to be one of the biggest power hitters of this generation, without question. I mean, the guy can just flat out hit. 53 home runs in his rookie year. Again, rookie year. He hit 53 bombs. He broke the record for the most home runs by a rookie in their rookie season, and I mean, he absolutely trounced on the record. So I think that if you're the Mets, you probably are saying, hey, I'm trying to build my team around him. He's got the ability to be, I think, a star for many, many years. Won the Rookie of the Year in the NL last year, and I think that if you continue to put talent around him and you take the attention, because right now I think a lot of the attention is on him, and as a result, I think it might bog him down a little bit and say, man, everybody, they're throwing their best stuff at me because I'm the focal point. I am the centerpiece of all of this. And as a result, I think that if you can get some talent around him, which I think they're slowly starting to do, then that's going to really pay off for him in his overall career. Not to mention, the guy can belt runs just in general. I mean, he had 120 RBIs on the season, and he batted .260, and he slugged .583 with a 941 OPS. Not that bad of rookie numbers, if you ask me. And again, this year, it wasn't great for him. I mean, he had a .231 average, so it was okay. Again, I'd like to see, if you've got an 850 or higher OPS, I'd like to see at least a 250 average. That's my general opinion of it. So 231, a little bit under that mark, but he did have 16 homers, did have 35 RBIs, and 817 OPS, so he still had some good power numbers, and he led the NL in home runs last year and really the entire league, so obviously that's a foregone conclusion at how good he is. And if, again, they go out and get a big-time free agent, things could really open up for him potentially. I will say he was third in strikeouts in 2019 with 183, and he only had 72 walks. So clearly he needs to figure that out. Clearly that is an issue for him. Clearly that is a point of his game that he needs to clean up a little bit, the patience at the plate and the ability to draw more walks. And I think that's what's going to happen as they add more pieces. Guys like McNeil, guys like Conforto, guys like Dominic Smith, they start to develop and become really good players themselves because, I mean, out of those three, I think McNeil and Smith are going to be really, really, really good. Not saying anything against Conforto. He'll be good too, but really liked what I saw out of McNeil and Smith this year. And I think that if they can continue to develop, it's going to take a lot of pressure off of Pete Alonso, and as a result, it's going to better his career. So I'm putting him at number 6. I think he has the potential to eventually be a top 5 first baseman in the league as time goes on. But I want to get in my top 5 now. And coming at number 5, Anthony Rizzo. Anthony Rizzo, I'm not a huge fan of him just because as a Brewers fan, you don't really like anybody on the Cubs, but you've got to respect his game, right? I mean, the guy's had numerous years of 30-plus home runs. He's had at least, a couple seasons of having over 100 RBIs. So the guy can clearly hit. He had 4 straight years from 2014 to 2017 of over 30 home runs, and then 3 of those 4 years from 2015 to 2017, he had over 100 RBIs. So he clearly has big-time numbers that he's capable of putting up, not to mention one of those years, I'm not going to lie, 2016, 2017, they were pretty identical years minus the change in his batting average. He hit 32 home runs and 109 RBIs in both seasons. The only difference, 2016, he had a 292 average, and in 2017, had 273 average. His OPS did drop down a little bit from 928 to 899, but from 2014 to 2016, he was an all-star. He's been in the MVP voting before. He's won a couple Gold Gloves. He's won a couple Silver Sluggers. So the guy can not only hit the ball, he can also field, and that's a huge, huge thing that I think a lot of people forget about first basemen. They don't really get the respect, I feel, that they deserve as fielders. And so being a really good fielder at the first base position, you have to give him credit because it's a tough position to play at times. I don't think people realize, although it seems very easy, having to pick balls out of the dirt or having to stretch properly or trying to have to, on a bad throw, configure your body in a way where you'll be able to at least stay on the bag or try and catch it and then tag the runner. I mean, there's a lot of things moving, a lot of moving pieces going on all at once at that first base position, especially if it's a bad throw or if it's a close play. And being able to have a fielder or a first baseman that is that good of a fielder, that's always a great sign. I personally think that Rizzo he might get moved. He might get traded, in all honesty. I mean, he's 30 years old. So he's not necessarily out of his prime. I think that from 2014, 2016 was kind of just a glimmer into what he's capable of doing, and we've kind of seen a little glimpse of it. And I think now, as he progresses into his 30s, he might see a lot of success that a lot of these other guys start to see into their 30s and mid-30s and even in the later 30s. And I think that as time goes on, he could continue to get back up to those numbers. I mean, in 2019, he batted .293. So he's not that far removed from a really good season, and he had 27 homers and 94 RBIs. So he clearly has not been that far removed from being successful. So I think that Anthony Rizzo is going to have a lot of many more years ahead of him, and I really am kind of excited to see where he winds up because I don't know if he'll stay in a Cubs uniform. I could see them eventually shipping him off for prospects once they get through a rebuild phase because I think that is on the verge in Chicago, but we'll have to see. Getting into number 4 now, Max Muncie. I'm a big fan. Well, I'm going to retract that statement for a second. Again, as a Brewers fan, you don't like teams that beat your team. The NLCS in 2018, they beat my team, and Max Muncie was a big culprit of that. But you got to give the guy his respect, right? He's a really, really good baseball player. Sure, he's not a great average guy. He doesn't hit for a huge average. But if you think about it, he's a great guy when it comes to power. He had 2 straight years from 2018 and 2019 of 35 homers. And then in 2018, he had 79 RBIs, and in 2019, he had 98 RBIs, and he was an all-star in 2019. So the guy can clearly play. The guy, and he's only been playing, this is his 5th year. He's 29 years old. He took, there was a year where he was injured for most of the season in 2017. So, this is his 5th year playing, and he's only 29. So he's got a lot of potential. He's got a lot of promise, I think. Only had 12 homers and 27 RBIs this past year. But what I really look at, and what I think a lot of people also look at, is his WAR. His WAR is absolutely staggering. In 2018, he had a 4.1 WAR, and then in 2019, a 5.7 WAR. So if he was just strict, because he doesn't just play first base, he's really a solid utility guy. I think he's kind of a diamond in the rough that you don't find very often, a guy that can hit. He's also really good at drawing walks. He's a very, very patient hitter, and I think that's another thing that, people need to take a little bit more into consideration. Sure, his strikeout numbers are pretty high, but, in 2019 had 90 walks. That's not too bad. He 889 OPS. 2018 had 973 OPS. The guy can clearly hit. This was his first year in the last 2 seasons that he's been below 100 in OPS plus. So hopefully he can get back to his normal form, because when he's at his normal form, he's one of the best in the business. Now, the third guy I want to get into is Paul Goldschmidt. Paul Goldschmidt is, I think, people forget about him, and I don't know why. I don't know if it's because the Cardinals are a forgettable franchise or what, but Paul Goldschmidt, I think, is one of the best first basemen in the game. I mean, the guy has been an all-star 6 times. He's won 3 Gold Gloves, 4 Silver Sluggers. Not that bad of a season, if you ask me. 2013, he led the NL in home runs and RBIs at 36 bombs and 125 RBIs. But then if you look down even further, from 2017 to 2019, he had 3 straight years of over 30 home runs. And he also hits for a very, very solid average. If you look at it, in 2013, that career year he batted .302. He had a .952 OPS. And again, like I said, if you've got an .850 OPS or higher, and you've got a .250 average or higher, I consider that all-star numbers nowadays if you're a power hitter. And again, you have to probably have 20-some home runs and 60-some RBIs by the all-star break. But if you're batting .302 and you're putting up 36 home runs, that is a staggering number. That is alarming if you ask me. So I really like Goldschmidt. I love the way that he fields, too. I think he's very, very mobile. He's great at stretching and picking balls out of the dirt. So I'm going to give number 3 to Paul Goldschmidt. And then the last 2 guys I want to mention, I think we all know where this is going. It's just a matter of who puts who at 1 and who puts who at 2. I'm putting Freddie Freeman at 2, and then I'm putting Jose Abreu at 1. Why? I've always liked the way Jose Abreu plays the game. I've just thought that he's been very consistent. Both of them were MVPs in their respective divisions this year, or leagues, I should say. Freddie Freeman's a 4-time All-Star. He's a Gold Glover. He's been a Silver Slugger before. Jose Abreu has been a 3-time All-Star, 3-time Silver Slugger. MVP, Rookie of the Year. He's won a lot of awards. They've both been very decorated over the last few years. And I think if you look at their numbers, they're somewhat of similar players, just in opposite leagues, really. I mean, they both hit for pretty solid averages. Last year for Jose Abreu, he batted .317, and he had 60 RBIs, which led the entire MLB. And then over for Freddie Freeman, he batted .341. He had 13 homers and 53 RBIs. So they're guys that are, again, hitting staggering numbers, and you can see why they're so good. They're hitting those, their numbers are just astronomical. So I'm going Freddie Freeman 2, Jose Abreu 1. Ultimately, though, these are some really good first basemen, all in all. And again, I left Albert Pujols off the list. I left Miguel Cabrera off the list because they're out of their prime. These are the guys that are in their prime now, and I think that are going to continue to be really, really good down the road. And I think that some of them are just on the verge and really on the cusp of having career seasons. It's only a matter of time before they figure things out. Guys like Luke Voit, Matt Olson, I think that they're just right there on the come-up. I think Paul Goldschmidt and Freddie Freeman and Jose Abreu, they kind of take the mold of the best first basemen right now. They're kind of I think, what all other first basemen should look up to and try and be and try and mold their games after, because those 3 guys are all really good hitters. Freeman and Paul Goldschmidt at least are 2 really good fielders. Jose Abreu's okay at fielding, but ultimately all 3 of them are great, and all 10 of these guys are phenomenal baseball players. So that will close things out here for us in our second segment on the GSMC Baseball Podcast. Thanks again for tuning in. After the commercial, I'll get into discussing what the likely landing spots could be for DJ LeMahieu and discuss where he might be playing next year. It's been a lot of fun so far, folks, but we have got a lot more to go. So don't change that channel, because we'll be right back here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Baseball Podcast. Great to have you all here still with me today. Jack Ridenauer again, and in the last segment, I got into ranking my top 10 first basemen in the MLB right now and discussing who is the best at the position overall. I want to now open up this third segment, getting into another kind of matchup game of where DJ LeMahieu might land during the offseason and which teams could potentially be the best fits for the star second baseman. Because honestly, I've seen a lot of different things about a lot of different teams, and it's very interesting, and it's always fascinating to hear kind of the different reasonings behind why certain guys would fit better on certain teams and why other guys might not. And LeMahieu, he fits the bill for a lot of these teams because he's a very good hitting second baseman, which again is something that you don't really find a whole lot nowadays. And not to mention, he's got a great glove. So if you incorporate both of those, then you've got somebody that you could really use as... Now, I don't know if you'd want to use him in the long term because he is 32, 33, so maybe a little bit more of a shorter contract, something like 4 years, maybe 5 years, but somebody that you could at least build with for a couple years, try and surround some other young pieces with him, and then all of a sudden you might have a really good winning ball team. So I want to dive into and discuss which teams I think, or which teams have been kind of the big name ones that he might land, and then some of my picks as where he could also land. So the first obvious choice I think is the Yankees, right? I mean, he could re-sign with them. Obviously, Brian Cashman has been vocal about two things. One, he wants pitching, and two, he wants to re-sign DJ LeMahieu. So that could definitely be something that could be factored in. Not to mention, he's got a familiarity thing with New York. He's been in the market before. He's been with this team, and I think he's aware that if he can in all honesty, if I'm DJ LeMahieu, I re-sign with the Yankees. I take a little pay cut, and I say, hey, go out and get some pitching because we've got plenty of hitting. And they do. They literally have plenty of hitting. They have, if he re-signs, they've got LeMahieu, Stanton, Judge, Urshela, Torres. I mean, the list. I mean, if they keep Gary Sanchez, he's got pop in his bat when he's playing well, if he wants to play well. They've got a Luke Voigt. I mean, they've got a lot of guys that could do a lot of damage against any pitcher. So going out and getting pitching could be their first top priority if LeMahieu resigns and he says, I'm taking a pay cut, go out and get some good pitching. Because they definitely need some extra pitching around Garrett Cole. Because if not, it's very obvious. It drops off significantly from Cole after that. And I think that, Tanaka, if he's going to be around, I think, if I'm not mistaken, he's a free agent. So if he is able to stick around, then maybe they can try and form something after those two. But in all honesty, the pitching core is not looking too great in New York. LeMahieu's also coming off a career season in a Yankee uniform, so that might be something to factor into it. He had an MLB high 364 average. He had 10 homers, 27 RBIs, a 1.011 OPS. Again, an AL high in that category, so the guy can flat-out play, and I think the Yankees would love to have him back in the pinstripes, and they would be adding back a huge bat, no question about that. And clearly, again, they'd probably have to pay him a lot of money, but if he was willing to take a pay cut, I think it would be something interesting. He is, like I mentioned, getting into his 30s, so they might not want to sign him for a long-term deal, and maybe he's also aware of that. Maybe he doesn't want necessarily a long-term deal, but something that's going to be a hefty deal, but something that can at least allow whatever team he lands on to maybe go out and get another piece to really try and build. But I think that the Yankees, they want revenge from this past year, and I think they're willing to do anything to do that, and I think going out and trying to re-sign DJ LeMahieu should be priority number one, in my opinion, right after the pitching, I would say. So that's one team, but then their crosstown rivals in the New York Mets is another destination that has been a very, very highly talked about landing spot for LeMahieu, and it makes sense. Robinson Cano is out for all of next year. He's been suspended by the MLB, so they have a wide open hole over at second base. Not to mention, if you think about it, this Mets team, they've got a lot of young talent, and like I just mentioned, they go out and get a veteran bat, really good hitter, somebody that's still in their prime, and you surround them with guys like Conforto, Dominic Smith, Pete Alonso, Jeff McNeil. I mean, you've got solid pieces in that lineup, and if they can maybe go out and make a move to get a shortstop potentially, I mean, they've already signed James McCann, so they've got things figured out behind the plate. But if they can get LeMahieu and stick him over at second, and who knows how long he'll be there, but even in the event that Robinson Cano comes back with the Mets in 2022, then you could put Robinson Cano at the DH if the DH goes universal by then. If not, then I don't know what you would do by then. Maybe you just let Robinson Cano walk or you trade him, whatever. But I would definitely try and make a point to go after DJ LeMahieu. And I've seen a lot of things where it's kind of this race in New York to who's going to get LeMahieu first. And I think that it was wise that the Mets addressed their catching issues. They went out and got a good catcher. They paid a fraction of what they were going to have to pay with JT Realmuto. And maybe that was kind of their thinking, like, hey, let's go out. We obviously need a catcher, but let's go about this in a smart way. Let's go after a catcher that we can pay a fraction of what we would have to pay to JT Realmuto and then go out and maybe get another big piece. And the Mets have been all over the news and wanting to be aggressive this year and whatnot. And I think that getting LeMahieu could be that aggressive move. They've got pitching. They've got a ton of pitching. And I know I mentioned in the first segment discussing how Brad Hand has been kind of another name floating around the team, and he would be a really good fit. So this Mets team could be cashing out this offseason and really trying to go all in for next year. They clearly have a lot to get through in the NL with how the Nationals have improved, and then the Braves, and then you also have the Padres. The list goes on. The NL Central, I think, is going to flop. I'm not... And I hate to say that as a Brewers fan, but I don't have very good hopes for this NL Central coming up this year, especially with how the Cubs are right now. They kind of give me this feeling of they're going to be in a rebuild phase pretty soon. And then the Cardinals, kind of the same thing. You know, I mean, these teams are kind of might start going through kind of some turnover. Maybe it'll give an opportunity for a team like the Brewers or the Reds to rise up. But, I mean, the Reds are going to have to really hope that they can hold on to any pitching for next year, because if they shop anybody, it's going to be a tough year in Cincinnati, I think. But again, the Mets, I think, would be a really good fit for him. And honestly, this is a team that hasn't been in the playoffs since 2016. You know, they're 5 years removed from their World Series run in 2015 where they lost to the Royals. And if you look back at, you know, to what they did in the offseason, they hired new management. They go out and get their new GM, Jared Porter. Jared Porter has been very, very successful in his career. He spent time under Theo Epstein in Chicago and Boston. He was part of World Series teams. So he brings a winning mentality, and he's an aggressive guy. He's somebody that's going to go out and try and make deals. He's already done that so far with James McCann. So maybe he can continue this trend moving forward and really keep up with this style of pursuing free agents and pursuing players. And if he can do that, I think the Mets are going to be in business this year. Another team I want to discuss that could see LeMahieu in their uniform next year, the Blue Jays. And this is a team that has expressed interest in wanting to spend money. That's why I put them there. Also, I've seen a lot of things that LeMahieu might land there potentially, depending on what they do with, I know that Francisco Lindor has been another name tied to the Blue Jays, potentially trying to make a trade with the Indians. And if that's the case, that would be arguably one of the best middle infields in all of baseball. Lindor and LeMahieu, I mean, how much better can you get there, right? So I think that if they do make that move and try and get Lindor, look to see them try and get, LeMahieu. But at the same time, I don't know why they would get Lindor. Bo Bichette does a phenomenal job unless you move them over to... You'd have to do a lot of rearranging with this Blue Jays team. If you go out and you get LeMahieu, you stick him at second. Now you've got Kevin Biggio there, and Kevin Biggio, I think, he's got a bright future ahead of him. Obviously, he's a son of a Hall of Fame baseball player, and Craig Biggio, and somebody that is a very decorated player. And Kevin Biggio, I think, is going to eventually have a good career himself. But what do you do if you bring in a new second baseman? Do you just have him sit behind LeMahieu and maybe learn a thing or two? Do you trade him, maybe try and get some prospects for the future? What would you do with Biggio? I think that's going to be the biggest question. But if they were to get Lindor, you can move Bichette over to third. I know Vlad Jr. wants to be back in the infield, but you can either put him at first base or you could stick him at the DH. And in that event, then you've got a first baseman at Vlad Jr., then you've got LeMahieu, you'd have Lindor and Bichette. That's a really tough infield. And so I think that it would be very interesting to see what this team does, even though they're $6 to $7 million under the league average in salary this past year. So it's kind of weird that they want to go out and spend, but maybe they see an opportunity because a lot of other teams don't want to do that. So they could try and capitalize on that, and they honestly should. They should go out and be aggressive. And if they go out and get DJ LeMahieu, and they got already, like I said, Bichette and Vlad Jr., don't forget about that outfield they've got in Lourdes Gurriel, Teoscar Hernandez coming off a career season. Two guys that would be a huge piece in their lineup, and then you, again, throw in everybody else. I mean, that's going to be a really good team, and this team already, I think, surprised some people this year going to the playoffs, their manager being a finalist for the manager of the year. They've got a lot of things on the up and up, I think, in Toronto, and they might want to capitalize on it because, again, they might see this opportunity and this window of time to try and go and make a move. So this could be their opportunity, this kind of weird offseason that we're having. So maybe we'll see LeMahieu still in the AL East, but just with another team. Now, the next team I want to get into is the Dodgers. Okay, there's three more teams that I think he could land on. The Dodgers is one of them. Plain and simple, they can pay him. Kike Hernandez is going to be a free agent. Sure, you could stick Max Muncie over at second, but why don't you just leave him at first maybe and then put LeMahieu at second? And they need a move to counteract what the Padres have been doing. I mean, the Padres, I think, have ascended themselves into the top-notch spot, and I think the number one ranked team even after or even ahead of the reigning World Series champions because of all of the additions they've made and the team that they already have. The Dodgers, sure, they've got all the pitching in the world. They've got great bullpen. They've got great hitting. But if you also think about it, Justin Turner is going to be a free agent, and he is a free agent. So as a result, the payroll is going to be a little bit more loose this year. Don't have to pay Hernandez, don't have to pay Turner. You could see LeMahieu maybe land in a Dodgers uniform, wants to move out to L.A., get away from the cold, be in the warm weather all year long. I know the Dodgers did extend Blake Trinan's contract for another 2 years. I don't think it really does a damage to their payroll because it's $17.5 million over the 2 years. So you're not making a whole lot. I mean, you're making a lot, but you're not making that much in the grand scheme of things for the L.A. Dodgers. And so I think LeMahieu would be a great counteract for the Dodgers to try and balance out what the Padres just did, going out and getting pitching. Dodgers will say, hey, let's go out and get some really good hitting, and that's what they can do. I think that they would dominate with him. If you think about that lineup with Taylor, and you've got Seager, Bellinger, Betts, LeMahieu. I mean, if Will Smith develops, Will Smith. Now, again, they'd have to figure out what they're going to do at third base. What do they want to do there? Maybe they move Chris Taylor there. Maybe they move him. I don't know what. Maybe they move Seager around. They'd have some moving around to do. But ultimately, they do have some room for LeMahieu, and it seems to be a likely spot for him. A lot of things I've read in the news is that he's definitely somebody that could land there eventually. And if it's not necessarily this year, I don't know when it would be because, again, the time is ticking for him. But I think that the Dodgers could be a very suitable candidate for DJ LeMahieu. Now, another team that I want to get into that is also in the same city is the Angels. And I know this team hasn't really been in the news trying to go after him a whole lot, but this is a team that I think they need help everywhere. I mean, I've seen all sorts of different names being in the rumors for them and all these other players, Joe Musgrove maybe being traded there, Trevor Bauer maybe being linked there because of his local ties to L.A., whatever it might be. This team, I think, has got something special, and they don't really realize it. They went out and got Jose Iglesias, and I love that for them. They go out and get a nice shortstop. He batted above 370 this year. I know he didn't play a full season, but he still batted very well in the time that he played. Anthony Rendon had a great year, started off slow, but then picked it back up, figured it out. And if you've got those two over on the left side of the infield, now you go over to the right side of the infield, and you put DJ LeMahieu at second, very similar to like in Toronto, you'd have Iglesias and LeMahieu. That's a pretty good infield. That's a pretty good middle infield, if you ask me. And you also factor in the fact that in the lineup you will have LeMahieu and Rendon and Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani. You'll have a lot of pieces that you could really work with. I think what they'd also have to go out and do, though, is go out and get pitching because the pitching is atrocious. Dylan Bundy is really the one that's anchoring this team right now pitching-wise, and they can't get it done with just Bundy. I mean, their ERA was astronomically high this past year. They had one of the worst team ERAs in baseball. So I think that they need to, for sure, go out and get pitching. I think that might be their top priority. But don't be shocked if you see LeMahieu maybe making a little kind of make his way a little bit over into an Angels uniform. I think that, would be very interesting. Clearly, Anthony Rendon took a gamble on the team, so maybe that will have something to do with it. I mean, who knows? But I definitely think that, this is a team that's going to be really, really good in the long term, and that's what I'm really, really excited to see. And we'll kind of, have to figure it out from there. But in all honesty, I think if they had kept LaStella, they would have been really, really good. I don't know why they got rid of LaStella, but if they were able to keep him, then I think that would have probably figured out a lot of their problems that they are having right now at the second base position. But they let him walk. He's with the Athletics right now, and so it is what it is. You can't do anything about it now. But another team that I think would be really good for him is definitely the Angels, but then also the last team, and I briefly mentioned them before, the St. Louis Cardinals. And I think that, they could be a great fit for him because Colton Wong, is well past his time. I think Colton Wong is way overdue to leaving St. Louis. I think that I don't know why they haven't moved on from him. You know, there's a lot of aging stars in St. Louis, and I know that going out and getting a 32-year-old second baseman's not ideal, but if he's in the stage of his career that he's in, and he's been having a really, really good career the last couple of years, why not go and get him? Molina's slowly going on his way out. Like I said, Colton Wong is really underperformed the last few years. Matt Carpenter's getting older. They've got a couple guys that haven't really performed all that well, so they need to go out and figure out this situation that they've got. I know St. Louis, I always relate them to, you know, if anybody out there is a big NBA fan, to kind of the San Antonio Spurs. They don't necessarily always get it done with the biggest and baddest names in the sport. They just do it very just clean and concise and traditional in how they win. They just play team sports. They just play team baseball. They play team basketball. And they go out and get the pieces that fit the right way, and that's how they win. Yeah, they've had superstars in the past. I'm not saying that they haven't. Same thing with the Spurs, but it's just a winning franchise. They know how to win. They know how to get it done, and they're a team that is definitely able to, you know, I think churn out a lot of success because of that mentality and how their front office is ran and how their team is ran overall. Not to mention they could pay him. I mean, they might not want to pay him because he's getting older, but they could pay him. I mean, they've got one of the higher, you know, salaries in baseball, and as a result, I think that he could fit well in St. Louis, and I think it could really shake things up in the NL Central. Not to mention, it could give them a better shot than I think they're going into this year with because, again, the Cardinals are limping their way into next year. They're just so old. And the same thing with everything in the NL Central right now, it's so stale. And so I think that there's long overdue, time to make a little bit of a change. So I'm looking forward to seeing where LeMahieu will land. I'm sure we'll figure it out very soon here. And once we do, I'm going to be one of the first people to let you all know about it because it's going to be, again, some insane news when it breaks. So that'll do it for this segment, folks. Thanks for sticking around, but stay right there because we'll be right back after this commercial break for the final segment today where I will discuss in my new segment, Buy It or Deny It, whether or not I am all in on the speculations for the free agency landings that the MLB thinks, in which I agree and disagree with. Don't go anywhere, everyone, because we've got one last segment here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup final.
Listen now.
Hey everyone, and welcome back for the final segment here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast. Jack Ride and I are still with you. And in the previous segment, I got right into discussing where the likely landing spots might be for DJ LeMahieu this offseason and which teams might be the best fits for the second baseman slugger. I want to wrap up today's show and close it out with another Buy It or Deny It segment. I did it last time. I'm going to do this again. I really like this segment, and my Buy It or Deny It is going to center around the claims that the MLB.com has made about where certain free agents might land. And there's been a lot of different kind of ideas, theories, rumors, speculations, whatever you want to call it, and it's a very wide-ranging of ideas that these writers and these journalists have come up with. So I'm going to dissect it a little bit and try and, break it down, see if I would buy it or deny it. The first claim is the Blue Jays making a big splash in getting either Springer or trading for Lindor. So I would have to say I'm going to buy it, but I'm going to only buy half that claim. I would buy that they go out and George Springer. I don't think they'd go and trade for Lindor because, again, Bo Bichette is one of the up-and-coming shortstops in this league. I think that he is very or at least just not really noticed, at least, because, again, he's in a market that is not getting a whole lot of publicity, not getting a whole lot of media attention, and so I think he kind of falls by the wayside. But he's the son of a former All-Star. I think that he's got a lot of potential in him. He's got a great bat. He does need to clean up the fielding a little bit, and I think that's where Lindor would beat him out in that sense. But then if you're going to go out and trade for Lindor, you're going to have to cough up Bo Bichette, and then after that, Lindor will be a free agent in 2021, the offseason, in a year from now. So why not maybe go the safer route, go and get somebody like Springer, add that third piece in that outfield that's already got Lourdes Gurriel, and you have Teoscar Hernandez. So you've got two really good centerpieces there, and then you add Springer. Then you can figure out the infield as you go. You already have a lot of really good young pieces when you think about it. Bo Bichette, Vlad Jr., Kevin Biggio. And like I mentioned in my previous segment, if we see LeMahieu go to the Blue Jays, that would even be a little bit more of a big-time, I think, team for people to pay attention to. And I just don't think Lindor would fit. So I don't buy that claim, but I definitely buy the claim that George Springer could land in Toronto. And I think George Springer is going to become a very interesting free agent in where he'll land because of just the teams and the various organizations that have said that they are willing to spend money and willing to go out and get extra pieces and whatnot. So I'm going to buy half of it. I'm not going to buy the other half. I'm going to deny the other half. So that's my first one that I wanted to discuss kind of because, again, the Blue Jays, the Mets, they've all kind of really been in the news, I would say, every week, and rumors have been circulating around those teams for a long time this offseason, and it's just, I think, a matter of just when these moves will be made. So I'm going to buy half, deny the other half. The next one I want to go is LeMahieu going to going to L.A. and not to New York. I'm honestly going to deny this claim. I think that he'll actually wind up staying in New York or he'll go to the Mets. I could see him saying, I don't want to go over there. They're already stacked. They're already loaded. I could also see the Dodgers not wanting to pay him necessarily because, again, how long will you have him? He's 32 years old, and in all honesty, one or two injuries away from being really done with his career because he's slow. I mean, again, you can still be really good in your mid-30s and upper 30s. There's guys that have proved it. But if you're a position player, not necessarily a DH or a pitcher, somebody that's playing in the field every single day, that's when the age starts to really accelerate, if you will. And so as a result, I think that you need to be wise if you're the Dodgers and say, do we really need LeMahieu at second? Yes, the Padres did make some really great moves, but we already still have a lot of great hitters on our team that aren't going to be going anywhere. Plus, they could maybe figure out some other positions that they need to orchestrate, and they need to, who knows? George Springer could wind up playing for the Dodgers, and then that's another guy that they're going to add. So I'm going to deny that LeMahieu goes to L.A. because I just think that the Yankees are more of a suitor for him. They've made it clear that they want to re-sign him. That is a top priority of theirs, and so I think that they're going to do everything in their power. I mean, it's two of the top payrolls in baseball, so it doesn't really matter, I think, where he's going to wind up because he's going to get paid regardless. It's just a matter of who's going to be a better fit for him, and I think the familiarity will kick in. In all honesty, I could even see him going to the Mets. That's a team that needs a second baseman. The Dodgers, yeah, I mean, sure, you need a second baseman, but they've got so many really good players, and they've got so many talented guys that they could really just maneuver around in the entire infield and their entire lineup. And I think that the Mets are the ones that are in need of a second baseman. They're in need of an extra bat, and I think that it would be the finishing touch on the top of the cake for the New York Mets. So I'm definitely going to deny that he goes to L.A. I don't think that'll happen. I would actually be really shocked if he did go to L.A. I think that the Angels would be another one that would be kind of shocking if he did wind up. I know in my third segment previously I mentioned that maybe he goes to the Angels because they do need some help at second base, and I just don't see him going there. I really don't. So I'm going to deny that claim. The next one I want to discuss, it's another kind of more recent rumor because of the recent signing that the Mets did. It kind of kicked into gear this idea. Phillies re-signing JT Realmuto. And this might be a bold take, but it's okay. I'm going to deny it. I'm going to deny it, and I think a lot of people out there are saying, why would you deny it? They went and got Dave Dombrowski. They can go and try and work a deal with Realmuto. In all honesty, I think Realmuto is going to explore this free agency, and I think that he's going to land on a team that really needs a catcher. And even if there's a team that needs a catcher, he might still, no matter what, no team is going to turn away JT Realmuto. He might be one of the most sought-after free agents in general next to Trevor Bauer. It doesn't matter where he's going to go. He's going to find a spot in the lineup. He's going to start. He's going to be the team's catcher. It does not matter who's already there, unless it's maybe Yasmani Grandal. I would say other than that, though, and then maybe, Will Smith or Travis Darnell, some guys that have been pretty good the last 2 years or so. But ultimately, I don't think JT will re-sign in Philadelphia, and I think that what Dave Dombrowski should do is look at it on the grand scheme of things, right? You have to pay JT Realmuto. He wants a $200 million contract, so you're going to have to pay him quite a bit of money for quite a bit of time. And as a catcher, your durability can come into question because you're constantly in a crouched position for game after game after game, inning after inning after inning, and so the likelihood of an injury for him or the likelihood of him fizzling out is probably greater because he's getting into his, he's, again, 29, so he's still pretty young, but if he's getting into his 30s or whatever, then that's when you start saying, okay, was it worth paying him all this money? They already have Bryce Harper on an alarmingly high contract. They're paying him, I can't even remember what it was. I think it was $33 million a year, something astronomical. And so they're going to have to figure out what to do with that contract. It's not going to be going anywhere. They also need to figure out the shortstop situation. Didi Gregorius is not there right now. And I think, he's a free agent. He might resign, he might not. But I think they have other issues that they need to fill other than the catcher position. Sure, they want to keep JT there, and I don't see why they wouldn't want to. He's the best catcher in baseball. But I think that if they are smart about it and they look more of a long-term, maybe they save a little bit of money and they go out and get some other pieces because that's $200 million that they don't have to pay. That's the $200 million contract that they don't have to work. So I'm going to deny the claim that he re-signs with the Phillies because I think he'll go maybe to a contender. I don't see the Phillies being a real big contender, and I think what would be an incredible splash, and I mean an incredible splash, is if he goes to the Padres. That would be one of the hottest takes, I think, is that JT Realmuto maybe goes to the Padres. They sign him and they say, yeah, we'll pay you whatever. But again, now they went after Blake Snell, Yu Darvish. They've got a couple young guys that are going to be up for arbitration. They're going to be up for free agency soon, one of them being Fernando Tatis. Jake Cronenworth, same thing. Will Myers, same thing. So they've got other pieces that they need to figure out, but I don't see JT re-signing in Philadelphia. I think that he wants out of there secretly, and I think that he wants to explore his options and really try and find a new place to go play. And who knows, maybe he'll go to the Nationals or something. That's a team that also needs a catcher. I've seen a lot of things about them being in the news and them being linked to him. And the Yankees, another team that have been very linked to him. The Red Sox. All of these teams would fit just fine with JT Realmuto. So I'm going to deny the claim that he re-signs with the Phillies. I don't like that. I don't think that'll happen, and I just don't see them also wanting to pay that much money. So getting into my last three claims that I want to buy or deny, the first one, Mets going after Bauer. I think this is a big buy. This is a big buy claim. I think this is one that definitely has a lot of potential. I think that if they want to make a huge move, if they want to make a big splash, they already went out and got James McCann. They've got really good pitching as it is. They've got solid hitting. I think that it's them just getting one more piece, one or two more pieces. If they were able to go after Bauer and LeMahieu, I think then they would definitely rival the Padres for being a favorite for the World Series. This NL division or this NL league might really be stacked this upcoming year, at least in the East and in the West. Again, the Central not so much, but I'm definitely going to big buy this claim that the Mets are going to go after Bauer. They've made it very clear that they want to. They've made it very clear that they want to spend money. Jared Porter comes from a winning background as the general manager. He was an assistant GM with the Diamondbacks for a couple years. He was under the leadership of Theo Epstein in Chicago and in Boston. So he brings a winning mentality with him. And so as a result, when you bring that, you're willing to do just about anything and everything to go after those pieces that can fit that mold that you're looking for. And I think that Bauer definitely fits that mold. Again, Noah Syndergaard was a little uncertain on whether or not he was going to come back this year. They say he'll be back by the start of the season. We'll have to see. Is he going to be in full health? Is he going to be back to normal? Tommy John surgery is a serious thing to come off of. I believe that's what he's coming off of. And I think that not a lot of pitchers are usually up to speed and back to full-blown 100% normalcy when you're coming off Tommy John. I've talked to a lot of different guys that play minor leagues and major leagues, and they've all said when you come off of Tommy John, it takes you about 20 months to get back to normal. It's over a year of progressing and getting better. So I think that maybe they need to use this as almost insurance in case Syndergaard does not pan out and then their pitching rotation really just falls apart. They got rid of Walker. He's not there anymore. Honestly, I don't see why they would want to keep him. He's been good in the past, but this past year he was not very good. They obviously have Jacob deGrom, who's arguably been the best pitcher in baseball the last 2-3 years, and definitely the best pitcher in the NL the last 2-3 years. So I think that if they go out and get Trevor Bauer, deGrom and Bauer, that's a really mean 1-2 punch. So I'm going to big buy that claim that the Mets go after Bauer. My next one, Brantley going to the Braves if Ozuna goes. That's another really kind of big one that I've seen circulating around in the baseball world. I'm definitely going to buy that. I'm going to 100% buy that because they need, I think, some more hitting in the outfield. They would definitely benefit from having Brantley there. not to mention, if the DH goes universal, they can step Brantley at the DH, and he can fill that void that Ozuna's going to leave. Now, if Ozuna resigns and he stays, totally different story. I don't think they'd go after Brantley because Ozuna is going to want a lot of money. Same thing with Brantley. Now, with Brantley, what's interesting is that you could probably get him for a fraction of what you would get Ozuna, but I don't know if you would necessarily get the higher level of production that you could get like you did with Ozuna this past year. I know it was only 60 games, and it was a small sample size. And Michael Brantley has proved himself many, many times. He's a multiple-time All-Star. He's someone who's got a great bat. He's a really, really good hitter, and he would really fit anywhere in anybody's lineup. So I think that, and not to mention, I think they want to go get some outfield help. Nick Markakis, he's getting a little older. I think that they need to get a couple other pieces out there. I know they've got Ronald Acuna Jr., Ozzie Albies in the infield. They've got Dansby Swanson, Freddie Freeman. They've got a loaded team, and I think Brantley would round them out very well. They went out and got a veteran pitcher in Chucky Morton, and so I think they can go out and get a veteran hitter in Michael Brantley, and maybe they'll get lucky and sign him for, I don't know, a 2-year, $20 million contract, or a 3-year, $25 million contract, something that is not that dissimilar from what they're paying Charlie Morton on a yearly basis, but for a couple extra years because he's not necessarily at the point in his career that Charlie Morton is. I mean, Charlie Morton's on the tail end of his career, even though he's playing really well. This is probably the swan song, if you will, for Charlie Morton. Now, Michael Brantley, early to mid-30s, just about, somebody that is going to start fizzling out probably as time goes on, but you never know. I mean, Nelson Cruz is 40, and he's one of the best hitters in baseball still, so anything is really possible. I am going to buy the claim that Brantley does go to the Braves if Ozuna goes. That's the only situation I think that would actually work, is if Ozuna goes, they leave a little opening in the outfield, they need a batter, they need a bat in the lineup, and they could go and get that filled with Michael Brantley. My last claim that I want to discuss, and kind of the rumor that's been going around, Didi Gregorius going to Cincinnati. I'm going to deny this. I know that he got drafted by them. I know they have a history with him. I know that he spent time with the team. I just don't see them wanting to go out and spending even more money on guys because they've already went out last offseason and they went out and got Mike Moustakas, signed him a 4-year, $64 million deal. Nick Castellanos, the same exact deal. They're already paying a lot of guys, and maybe what they're thinking is, okay, we'll trade a couple players, we'll trade a couple pitchers. Now, I don't know why there are these rumors that they're going to trade Sonny Gray and Luis Castillo because, I mean, that's shooting yourself in both feet. And if Trevor Bauer is going to be walking, you're already down one of your aces. You need to keep Castillo and Gray as long as you can because if not, that pitching rotation is going to be wide open for a lot of different batters. And so if they do that, though, maybe they're secretly trying to go after Gregorius. Maybe they're trying to open things up in the infield a little bit. And, Moustakas over at third. They could figure things out. Or, Eugenio Suarez actually is over at third. And Moustakas probably playing a little bit over at second. Then you stick Gregorius over at short. That's a pretty good infield. Now, another thing is, what if they trade Eugenio Suarez? So now you really have a lot of juggling around. You have a lot of filling in the gaps, if you will, and I don't think they've got the payroll to do that. They don't have the financial capability to go out and get some big-time names. And Didi Gregorius isn't necessarily a huge name, but he's a big name, and he's going to want a lot of money. He's been successful. He's been a consistent hitter in this league. He's one of the better shortstop hitters, I would say. And so as a result, I just don't see Cincinnati being able to swing a deal with him. I don't think they can convince him, even though he's got some affiliation with them in the past. I think that he's on to bigger and better things, and he wants to have a serious shot at winning somewhere, and I don't think Cincinnati is where it's at, so I'm going to deny that claim. But again, this is a segment that I'll be doing a lot more often. I've gotten some good feedback about it, so I'm excited about that, and just kind of throwing out these different claims and ideas, and really ideas and rumors to see what people think, buy it or deny it. Do you think that it's something that's going to happen? Do you think it's not going to be something that's going to happen? So really excited to continue to give you all buy it or deny it segments because there's going to be a lot more different claims and rumors going around in baseball as there is in every sport every day. So it'll be a lot of things to buy and deny moving forward on the GSMC Baseball Podcast. So that'll wrap it up for us here today. Thank you for listening to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review. That really helps us. Also, if you can please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, we'd really appreciate that. And until next time, folks, thank you so much for listening and have a fantastic day.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.